Greetings, friends. You are on the Military Reports channel. And today we will discuss with you the situation in Ukraine on the 26th of May, 2024 year. A lot of things have happened today, so let's get started. And today began with a massive rocket attack on the territory of Ukraine, to be more precise. The Russian aerospace forces mainly struck at the central part, at the city of Kiev, at the Zhytomyr region, at Starokonstantinov, and basically all the targets as a whole. All the strikes were flying in the direction of Starokonstantinov. In these frames, we can on this map observe with you approximately the trajectories, routes of movement of both ballistic missiles, cruise missiles and drones. And as we see, all three colors, so red, blue and yellow, are in fact intertwined and intertwined in the area of the settlement of Starokonstantinov. Right here. It was here that, according to individual sources, according to reports that can be found in the public domain, it was here that the units of Ukraine planned or prepared airfields for the adoption of the F-16 suit. Some, let's say, sources have already begun to speculate on this. On this occasion, on this topic, I inform you that, on the whole, the airfield was already ready, and perhaps even today. The first batch arrived at Starokonstantinov in the 16th, and it is for this reason that today there is such a massive blow to this locality. While there is no confirming footage of the destruction of the B-16th, it has not been published. The Ukrainian side, in turn, published information about the work of the air defense. According to their data, 31, let's say, drones out of 31 launched were destroyed. 12 out of 12 Ha-100 and 555 missiles were also destroyed. The only thing that the Ukrainian side seems to agree with is that they did not manage to shoot down a single dagger. That is, only out of all the waste paper that was forcibly flown across the territory of Ukraine today. Only 2 daggers managed to break through the defense and air defense of Ukraine. However, it is clear that there is probably something smacks of something not quite right. What have we been waiting for? We are moving to the line of contact with you. The main news from the Kharkiv direction is that Zelensky continues to inflate the topic of a possible offensive by Russian units already in the northwest of the settlement of Kharkiv. According to him, according to his data, the armed forces of the Russian Federation are concentrating their forces somewhere 90 kilometers northwest of Kharkiv, already closer to the Sumy region. If we ourselves are similar, calculate where these 90 kilometers are, approximately estimate what Zelensky is talking about. Then he speaks approximately based on just arithmetic, mathematical calculations there. Approximately in the Gravoronsky district, somewhere here, according to his information, according to his data, Russian units continue to concentrate their forces. In general, this is not surprising, it is generally logical, since it is in the area of Grayvown, Kazinka, here in this place, that the APU has repeatedly tried to cross the state border during the period of a special military operation. For all the time there, in less than 3 years of a special military operation, 2 times Ukrainian units entered Kazinka, Grayvoron, tried to storm it. In other words, from the point of view of creating a sanitary buffer zone, it is logical that Russian units will try to attack from here in order to create the same sanitary zone that was created in the area of Lepsov, Volchansk. But if we talk about this direction, then here, most likely, the main goal of the Russian units will be the exit along the Kazenko line to the settlement of Ryabina or Krikovka, and here the distance is a little less than 30 kilometers. Krikovka to this place, as you can see, is a serious logistics hub that combines in one, let's say, the railway network with the settlement of Sumy Kharkiv Kiev. In other words, the advance to this locality will allow at least to cut one artery, one supply artery, which now feeds Kharkiv. Let's say, Western Ukraine. By the way, this is quite a serious direction from the point of view of some strategic importance. And today, some Telegram channels have already begun to publish exactly these shots. Perhaps you are familiar with them, perhaps you have seen them on different, let's say, pro-Russian, pro-Ukrainian sources. And these frames, according to the author. The authors of these posts are assured that we can observe the fighting already in the Sumy region. That is, until these frames have been deployed, it is not yet possible to say 100% that this is correct information or not. Also, again continuing the topic of speculation on the Sumy-Kharkiv direction, it is worth noting that, let's say, British intelligence also receives information that British intelligence warned Zelensky that the armed forces of the Russian Federation formed a grouping in the direction of Zolochiv in quotation marks. This is 70-80 kilometers northwest of Kharkov. There is also an increase in the military impact in the area of the settlements of Kadayevka and Goptovka. That is, if we transfer this information to the map, then here is the settlement of Zolochiv, here it is. It is here that, according to British intelligence, Russian units will advance. In other words, it's not this information anymore, it's not Krikovka, yes, that is, it's a slightly completely different picture. And there is a fire impact on the settlements of Goptovka and Kadayevka. In other words, according to this post, and it can be assumed that the Russian units will try to create a buffer zone. Approximately along this line, that is, they will try to combine, let's say, the Koloptsov direction, and then to the Grayvorn direction, and approximately such a buffer zone. There are quite a large number of important settlements here. Cossack Lopin, the same Zolochiv, Udy, these are large settlements, large villages. And there is a limited grouping of 15,000 people, of course, you can't take such settlements. That is, there should be a fairly more or less serious grouping of 50,000, and taking into account the fact that a large number of units have been transferred to the Apu in the direction. Yesterday, we discussed and heard the figure of 70 brigades of the armed forces of Ukraine, that is, this is a large number of units, and which are stretched only in the area of Kharkiv-Lipetsk, there is no talk about Volchansk at all. Therefore, a large group from Russia should work here, if there is a desire and a goal to set it, to take control of these territories, and create exactly such a sanitary zone. Then we move with you to the persons themselves, to the Lepsum. As you can see, there are no frames, no geolocations, so far nothing has been received in the last 24 hours. Everything is there, the direction is either on pause, or the most serious hostilities are really underway again. But we just don't see anything, understand anything, hear anything, as both sides are trying to minimize the flow of information from this direction as much as possible. Footage of the next application is coming from Kharkov. As a result of the next blow, or the arrival of the FAB in the city, we see with you that the building was almost demolished. But in any case the supports and walls remained. But we are well aware that the filling is maximally, let's say, inverted, riddled as much as possible. That is, but the building is certainly not subject to further residence. Then we are moving with you to the Volchansk direction. A similar story. There has been no news for the last 24 hours. Several frames were published, for example, on these frames we can observe with you how, during reconnaissance activities, another radar, a BQ-50, was loaded, in my opinion, and in the course of a Lancet strike, this radar was destroyed. That is, there are no advances, no details from Volchansk, Severny, Yuzhny. So far, there is no information about the status of the settlement of Tikhaya. For the second day in a row, it has been reported that it is under the control of Russian units, but no geolocations. No personnel, nothing, no flags have been received from this locality yet. Then we are moving with you to the North Cup direction. As you can see, there is a large number of geolocations, a large number of frames. Pay attention, almost to a straight line, let's say, of the strikes of the artillery counter-battery struggle, which took place along the line, let's say, Tokopinsk, and to the south, yes, the style of the flywheel. Definitely the work of one department. They work very clearly, let's say, along some radius, along some perimeter. A large number of artillery installations were destroyed with the use of drones. In other words, the Russian side continues to suppress positions in the USU at a distance, trying to minimize, let's say, the opportunities in the USU for counter-battery fighting. Counteracts the offensive, the advance of Russian units. The AFU published footage of artillery strikes on the positions of the Russian army in the village of Kislavka, Kotlyrovka, Ivanovka. We see with you the work of the Ukrainian artillery, these 220s, aviation, everything they have in the direction. That was subsequently destroyed by Russian units. All these shots as a whole confirm that both in the settlement of Atlayarovka, as Kislovka, as Ivanivka, is currently under the full control of a unit of the Russian army. The pro-Ukrainian cartographer Deep State also updated his map, indicating that at least 40–50% of Ivanivka is under the control of the Russian army. Then we move south, the settlement of Berestowaya. Today, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation confirmed in another daily report that the grouping of troops of the west of the Russian army during offensive operations managed to establish full control over the settlement of Berestowaya. The armed forces of Ukraine were forced to leave the settlement under pressure from Russian units. At the moment, based on the current configuration, you and I can observe a certain semicircle in the AFU units in the area of the settlement of Stilmakovka. Let me remind you that a few days earlier, information was received that Russian troops had entered Masazarovka. But so far neither geolocations, nor personnel, nor any more detailed information on the status of the settlement has been received. But if we sort of summarize all the news for the week that we have, then we see that really Stilmakovka is already in a kind of semicircle from the birch bark north, even slightly from the northwest, let's say from the north. From the northeast Novoselovka, East Klemychika, and from south Myasozarovka. Yes, that is, in fact, everything is ready for the Russian units. Everything is ready for further advancement, the encirclement and squeezing of the APU, and from these positions, it is in the same way. That is, the Ukrainian units have nothing left but to retreat to the west, further in the direction of Lozova. If the Ukrainian units still have such an opportunity. In other words, here the Russian army will continue to advance. We will observe how the situation will develop in this direction. Today, a number of sources have reported, so far without geolocation, without confirmation, that Russian units have also become more active in the direction of the settlements of Nadia and Novo-Igorovka. And this is, let's say, a bunch of the cities of Persherovaya, Kaponki, Novosergeyevka, Novo-Igorovka, Novaya Igorovka, Sergivka, the city of Canada. That is, in this direction, so far everything is within the framework of telegram posts, small messages. But if we, let's say, move this post to the map, then approximately in this way, Russian units are advancing, trying to wedge into the defense between Novo-Igorovka, surround two settlements, and also force the AFU unit to retreat to the west, say, from Nadia to Persherovaya, and from Novaya Igorovka, say so, in the same Chernishina. But so far these are just posts and nothing more, without confirmation by geolocation. Without confirmation of some more, let's say, reliable information. Well, then we are moving with you to the Belgorod-Seversk direction, from where very interesting shots are coming. And for example, in these frames, we can observe with you the process of how the Russian units stormed the southern part of, let's say, the chalk dump and the quarry these days. Here on the horizon, we can observe with you on these frames the Belogorovsky Malutville itself. It's very vague, very heavy shots, and very quickly everything develops dynamically, but you can basically observe it. In other words, from these frames it can be concluded that the Russian units advanced several, let's say, kilometers from Zakago, Zolotarevka north to Belogorovka, and in the last seconds, these two, at least attack aircraft, which were visible all the time on the frames, went into the very foundation, and the foundation of the Melitval and career. That is, based on these frames, it can be assumed that all the strongholds, let's say, are south of the Belogorskovsky quarry. So Malava is under the control of Russian units. For Belogorovka itself, no information has yet been received confirming the summary of the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation. But on the contrary, footage continues to arrive, strikes with flamethrower systems of the sun on the settlement itself. On the main central streets, which on the contrary confirms that the settlement is under the control of Ukrainian units, although perhaps the footage is archival. Then we move south towards the hour in Yara. There have been practically no changes over the past day, but no information has been received, confirming the complete control of the Golubkovsky mortars of the German forest, including the crossing of the Seversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal both from the south. Also, information has not yet been received confirming the entry of the Kalinovka settlement and the exit to the Seversky Channel, Seversky Donetsk-Donbass from the northern part. In other words, all this was published these days, but it was never confirmed. And also there is no information about the further advancement of Russian units, let's say in the eastern hours of the Yar. The only thing we have is the sun strikes on the part where the Russian units tried to enter the other day. Perhaps over these days, over this night, the Russian units rolled back from the eastern hour to the Yar and covered their own, let's say, the past positions of the old opposition have already been fired from, let's say, the sun. We also have no information about Kleshivka. There is no promotion or geolocation confirming this promotion. So we are moving on and moving with you to the Avdiivka direction, from where there is a small summary, a little information. Russian units continued their assault actions in the direction of Novoalexandrovka. It is present, progress is noted by various cartographers, and information is also received about the further progress of Russian units to the settlement of Novopokrovskoye, and in the direction of the settlement of Sokol. Russian-Ukrainian units are resisting, but it is insufficient to restrain the impulses of the Russian army. The settlement of Novoselovka is the first to be hit with the use of FABs. In other words, active assault operations are underway here. There was a slight pause associated with activation in other areas there. Literally for 1 or 2 weeks, the Russian units stood in line, and in general, and as I understand it, the Russian pause in the direction was mainly connected with the sweep before the sweep of the Arkhangelsk. As soon as Arkhangelsk was finally cleared, to be more precise, this stronghold, then, let's say, the pressures and gusts to the west from Berdik, Orlovka, and so on resumed. The pro-Ukrainian cartographers of Deep State confirm full control of the settlement of Manskaya. The last streets, the last building were painted, let's say, in the color of control by Russian units, that is, in red. And if you see, even more, that is, now the line of contact goes along the Babaki beam. That is, right up to this forest belt, everything is already under the control of the Russian army. Ukrainian units retreated to the west, closer to the Charles Reservoir. The footage of the armament of the next Russian flag in the area of the settlement of Neytalova is published. So there are more and more sources, there are more and more confirmations that the settlement is completely under the control of the Russian army. At least its, let's say, civilian part, that is, the part where buildings, residential buildings, and, let's say, public infrastructure facilities were located. And here, if we talk about Neytalova, there is a small farm in the south. Perhaps fighting is still underway for this farm. And here we are talking about these farms, these barracks. It is possible that a pre-sweep is being carried out here, and also after the final completion of the sweep, the Russian Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation will announce the complete seizure of this settlement. There is no serious news on Krasnogorovka, except for one video, which was published by the pro-Ukrainian cartographers of Deep State. In these frames, we can observe with you another column, another attack consisting of 6 pieces of equipment. And the attack was already on the Krasnogorsk citadel. In other words, this is a section of the city with high-rise buildings, which is located on, let's say, the eastern outskirts. And the landing, as we see with you, was successful. That is, the Russian units went along this route approximately, and the fighting took place. It was this part that was stormed. That is, the most extreme position of the Viso unit. This is a citadel, and high-rise buildings, as you can see, are the most unpleasant moment. The most unpleasant element for conducting assault operations, but, let's say, The most unpleasant Russian army decided not to postpone for later, but let's say to overcome it right away, after which, in fact, the rest of the red carpet will crumble and collapse. In other words, let's say that the battle for the last important stronghold of the high altitude in Krasnogorskrovka has begun. Georgievka has been completely quiet for the second week. There is no news, and today there is nothing new on the Novomikhailovka-Konstantinovka line. According to Staromayorsky Harvest, information is received that motorized infantry units of the Russian army continue to squeeze out Ukrainian units from the settlement. Here, let's say, a distinctive feature of Russian assault operations is the massive use of motorcycles and light motorized infantry units, which quickly break into houses, buildings, streets in Staromayorsky, thereby preventing the armed forces of Ukraine from responding to new threats in a timely manner. And in fact, the front is crumbling. And also in the near future, we should expect the establishment of full control. Although some sources have already hastened to report that Staromayorskaya, at least Staromayorsk, is already under the control of Russian units. Now the question is already about pre-cleaning and squeezing out the remaining units from the village of Yurodnoe. The question is, what are the future plans of the Russian army in this direction? Stop, or the movement will continue further north towards Velikaya Novoselovka. In the field of work, it is worth noting, for example, for the first time in a long time, published footage of artillery strikes on units of the armed forces of Ukraine in Novodanilovka. This village is located south of Orekovo, that is, nothing has flown here for a long time. In fact, the last few times something flew here during the Ukrainian counteroffensive, after which the Ukrainian units managed to expand the control zone, which forced the Russian army to pull artillery further south towards Tokmak. Now, everywhere with control over the work of the Russian army, it was again possible to tighten up artillery, reconnaissance, and other elements of, let's say, military infrastructure. And now the blows are starting to be inflicted on Novodanilovka again. Interesting news, interesting observations from, let's say, the Kamensky direction. Let me remind you that literally these days we have been discussing the increased activity of Russian units. A large number of drone strikes we observed with you during May, the arrival of the FA, again drones. Basically a big focus was observed in the area of Zherabyanka and Pyatakhatek, especially along the network of strong points located between the two villages. Here a large number of strikes were inflicted by mortars, artillery, aviation and drones in Beer. And today, Russian units reported on the capture of a large group, well, a small one, it's hard to say a large one. Several, let's say, soldiers in USU captured in this particular direction. Most likely, a reconnaissance was carried out with the aim of, let's say, capturing the languages that are being interrogated now. Most likely about the number of weapons, not the compositions, what is being defended, who is defending in the direction. That is, if we summarize all this, we can conclude that Russian units, including those planning to intensify hostilities along the Vasilyevka-Stepnogorsk line and possibly Lugovoy, Zherabyanki, Pyatakhatek, Stepovoy Mali Sherbaki. In other words, there is a high probability, as well as attempts by the Russian army, to expand the control zone. Let me remind you that the Dnieper grouping is one grouping consisting of all groups of troops that work in the theater of operations in Ukraine, which is not a shock. That is, the daily level of losses from the Afu direction is estimated at about 40-50 people. This is the maximum. For all the others, the losses have long exceeded 100. That is, if now the Russian Federation has the resources to turn, let's say, the Dnieper grouping also, let's say, into a strike group, then this can lead to the fact that the daily losses of the armed forces of Ukraine can reach up to 2,000 people a day. Now the daily losses of the armed forces of Ukraine, according to the summary of the Ministry of Defense, range from 1,300 to 1,500 personnel, which is extremely high and extremely critical for Ukraine. Next, let's discuss some political news. One of the most interesting and most important things is that, let's say, the Baltic countries today threatened and officially announced that if the Russian army, let's say, achieves operational strategic success in the Kharkiv direction, or achieves some kind of strategic breakthrough, then all the Baltic countries and Poland will send their troops to the territory of Ukraine in order to stabilize the front line, to prevent deep breakthroughs there. In other words, this information was officially announced today from the lips of officials. At the same time, Poland is trying in every possible way, of course, to avoid such a situation. No one wants to fight, as it were. And there is more and more talk from Poland about how this European state can help the Ukrainian authorities to return all Ukrainians who left Ukraine back to Ukraine so that they are mobilized, so that they do not have to send Poles, let's say, to the theater of operations of Ukraine for as long as possible. The German understands very well what is being done, what all things are going to, and what is happening now. Therefore, Scholz made it clear that there would be no deliveries of long-range missiles on the territory of Ukraine, since German officers are obliged to set them up, direct them, and maintain them. And this would mean the involvement of German officers in hostilities against the Russian Federation itself.